Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to the first part of our Rancher Roundtable series. Tonight we're going to talk about regenerative grazing. So thank you for coming and being here. Thank you to those joining us online as well. We decided to offer that because of the roads. So thanks to everyone that made it out in person and online. So if you're not familiar with the Conservation District, that's the office that we're in right now. We do stream permitting in this county. We do education opportunities. We have a garden space out here where we hold a lot of programs. We do health testing and cost share programs for landowners. So check out our website if you're online, or we have tons of resources in this corner as well. So Dave Scott is going to speak with us tonight about regenerative grazing. He's going to give a presentation and then we will have a discussion. So feel free to chime in. All right, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Sydney. And thank you for the Conservation District inviting me tonight. I really love regenerative grazing and I love soil health, so I'm amongst you very pleasantly. I guess we could go to the first slide, please. Okay, I put this slide up here just to get a chuckle out of you. It's not true, right? Well, I think it's true. But anyway, I wanted you to just give me some slack tonight, because some of the things that we might be talking about, if you're on a ranch, you might in your heart say, this will never work for me, even if it works for him. So I want you to just humor me tonight, and don't say that until you're through with the whole thing. And I'd encourage you not to say that for at least a week. Give it time to mull over. And because I was in a position 12 years ago where if I had heard these concepts, I would have said it'll never work for me. But it turns out it does. And I truly think that it'll work for everybody. Okay. Our farm is Montana Highland Lamb. We're in Whitehall, just south of Whitehall, about 5 miles. We have 200 ewes that we run on 32 acres. And we are on grass about 7 to 8 months of the year. And I'll just put a little timeline here. Is this what writes on it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. We are on grass from about May 20. We lamb April 18 this year. And so we are on grass with the lambs and the ewes till say August 5 or thereabouts. And then they're weaned, the lambs are weaned from their ewes, and the ewes go to spurge pastures that are our neighbors, and they love the ewes going there, and the lambs stay on our home pasture till about September 20. So that, and then when September 20 rolls along, we take all of our lambs and put them in our corrals, and they're fed hay and a little bit of barley, and they are marketed directly to the Bozeman, Helena, Big Sky areas, to restaurants, MSU, Community Co-op in Bozeman, and the Western Montana Grower Crop in Missoula. So we market about 300 lambs a year, basically cut by cut. So it's really important for us to have this time period on very high density grass, because that determines how the lamb tastes in the end. So our lambs stay in the corrals September 20th all the way to about June 30. Not all of them. We start marketing lambs in the first week in December, but the last lambs leave the corrals about June 30. The ewes, after the spurge pastures are over, about October 15 or so, they come back to our home pasture and they graze until February 1. So it's about 7 to 8 months we have grass for our sheep. Now, I won't be able to use it. I can erase that, right? Okay. So, that's kind of our yearly timeline, and we have 32 acres, it's all irrigated. We generally have good water rights, and so we can kind of count on water most of the time, every year. However, last year was nip and tuck, the year before was nip and tuck, and there's been 3 years out of the last 10 years that have been nip and tuck, where we've had to reduce our water probably for a week to 14 days, to keep enough water in the Jefferson River for fish. And just on a side note, we started our farm in 1982. We milked cows for 20 years. And I can remember very vividly in 1989, the river from Twin Bridges to our head gate, which was about a distance of 5 miles, it sunk. The term used was dewatering. I hate that term, but it sunk. It went underground and came right up by our head gate. And at that time, our ditch used every last drop of that water. That will never fly today. Okay, there's Jefferson Watershed Council, largely in existence because of what we did as a ditch in 1989. And so now we are working together with fisheries, outfitters, power company, and other irrigation ditches that come off the Jefferson River. So it's really important to us. We've learned that we need to have some resiliency on our farm, because there's going to be years where we'll be out of water maybe for 2 weeks. And so what we did for our grazing practices pre-2013 did not save water in our soil. And now we are having water saved in our soil. And so it's really been a benefit to that. So our 32 acres are divided into 43 paddocks. And before you say, oh, if there is only one paddock that we make a day. And it's all temporary, so we have 43 temporary paddocks. We spend about 30 minutes a day changing fences and moving sheep. So it's not that bad. We use the NRCS hoop. Everybody knows about that, probably, right? We take hoops every 5 days and see how much dry matter we have in that particular field where the sheep are then, and then we put it in a spreadsheet, so we know pretty close how much our grass production is throughout the summer. Okay. This picture just shows our infrastructure. We have 2 small pivots that irrigate about 12 to 13 acres apiece, and then the other 8 acres is hand lines. This picture here was taken in 2005. From 2003 to 2009, we just grazed the same with the sheep the same way we did the milk cows, which turned out to be a very colossal mistake. But it took us probably 6 years to figure out that it was a mistake. The biggest thing we had trouble with is the barber pole worm. Anybody familiar with the barber pole worm? Leah is, I'm sure. Okay, barber pole worm is a gastrointestinal worm, and it sucks blood out of the sheep or lamb, the ewes or lamb, and it can kill them. And so about this time, we were deworming every lamb, every ewe on our place every month during the summer to try to keep sheep alive. And of course, as you think, that dewormer that we were using the worms became resistant to it, right? In 2009. And when that happened, I thought, this is not gonna work over time. And so at that time, I didn't even know about the internet in 2009. So I called back east and in southern United States, southeast United States, where I knew they were having problems with worms. And I must have asked 10 to 12 people, extension agents, mostly what they were doing about the barber pole worm. And the common denominator was longer than a long rest period, like at least 30 to 32 days. And we were running 22-day rests because that's what we did to milk cows, because we wanted to keep the grass nice and short, so it's nice and vegetative, so it gets lots of milk, right? Well, with sheep and cattle, beef cows, that is the wrong thing to do. So you might take a pic, I'm gonna go back to this picture at the end, and just as a reference point to what our grass is now compared to what it was then. This picture depends on 160 pounds of actual N per season, to get 6 tons of dry matter over that season. This grass here is probably about 3,000 pounds of dry matter per acre, and that's what we're running with. There's about 22 inches of height to this grass, and it's on a 22-day cycle. Okay. So regenerative grazing.
Dave,
Yeah.
can I interrupt you
Yeah.
there? When you say it 22-day cycle, you're saying you bring your sheep back in there after 22
Right.
days?
22-day rest.
And the grass would be
It's about
adequate
20 inches high.
to hit it again.
Yeah,
Is what
hit it
you're
again. So we'd go over the field 5 to 6 times over the summer. Whereas now we have a 42-day rest period, and most of the pasture is grazed 3 times, including the winter. So that's the difference. So in 2013, I heard Gabe Brown. Anybody heard of Gabe Brown here at all? Yeah, well, he and the other person named Dr. Christine Jones from Australia, she's a soil microbiologist. I sat in a conference just like this one, and they both, Dr. Christine Jones said, you can grow 200 bushel corn with no inorganic nitrogen. And in 2013, we had solved our worm problem, and we were looking at our bottom line, and big red lights shone out, and it's worth spending a lot of money on fertilizer. You know, so I was looking at that time to figure out how to reduce fertilizer inputs. And here was Dr. Jones saying, you can grow 200 bushel corn with no fertilizer if you get the soil microbes to work for you instead of doing nothing with them. So my ears picked up, and then about 2 months later, I heard Gabe Brown say the same thing with grass. And so I cornered him after the conference, and I said, how do you do this? And he says, well, you've just got to get your soil microbes to work for you. And I said, well, how do you do that? He says, I can't tell you on your place, but I can tell you 3 main rules, and that's what we're going to go over. And you have to tweak them to your place, your individual applications. So regenerative grazing it propagates, and it depends on a functioning soil. And it's very simple after that. You let plants run the show because you give them a long enough time to grow between grazings to put out root exudates through their roots. And that stimulates the soil bacteria and fungi to become robust. And it's a deal going down there. It's like a Trump deal. Plant gives the sugars out the roots, but they don't give them out there until soil microbes bring plant nutrients in plant available form. And then that interaction goes. And when the minute you start putting inorganic in, especially or P on ground, that interchange stops. And this is what Dr. Jones told me. Her whole thing was she had researchally proven that exchange that takes place stops when you start putting inorganic in on. So you don't want to do that if you're doing regenerative grazing and if you want to get out of inputs. So by encouraging that exchange to occur, you get your soil microbes to do all the work for you. Instead of driving around with a tote, fertilizer tote every month, putting it on, wasting a whole day, they do it for you. Instead of irrigating every day of the summer that it doesn't rain, this regenerative system will cut your irrigation down by at least 25% because you're leaving a roof on your soil with trampled grass. So that keeps your soil temperatures down, keeps your soil moisture in the soil. So those things are working for you. And then all you gotta do is sit back and watch the whole thing work. It just kind of unfolds for you. And it's very important to watch because you've got to monitor what's going on out there in case something goes bad. You've got to identify it, and then you have to figure out what to do. Okay. All you need is plant, soil, sunlight, and water. You don't need compost, you don't need things in a bag, things in a bottle. All you need is plant, soil, sunlight, and water. And what you do with those things is you add an herbivore. And this is very, very important, is to add the herbivore. Even if you're growing farm crops like barley, hay, or anything like that, if you don't add the herbivore, the regenerative system isn't gonna work for you. Because likely as not, if you're in hay or barley, you are harvesting a crop off of that, and you're exporting that crop. None of that crop gets back into your soil. But the livestock, they cycle nutrients, and so a sheep or a cow, doesn't matter which, about 70–80% of what they eat goes right out the back end in two forms, piddle and poop. And so you're cycling those nutrients that they ate. 2 or 3 days later, it goes right out. So 70–80% is a lot. Okay. Oh, I want to say one thing about this. Good. I can go back. This grass that the sheep are going into, this is about June 15th. So it's been growing for about a month since we turned out. And, you know, a dairyman would look at this grass and they go, oh, come on. There's nothing in that grass. You know, it's all mature, it's headed out, stemmy. You're not gonna have anything there. There's milk later. Cattle and sheep, there's enough nutrients in there to grow good lambs, put milk out for sheep. And the reason why is because sheep have a distinct advantage, and I'll show this on another site. They look at that and they eat the leaves and a little bit of the stems to balance crude fiber. Cattle can't be quite so nitpicky, little scissor bills like sheep have, but they can do a very good job. And cattle also recognize the fact, just from body feedback, that the top third of the plant is the highest in energy and highest in protein. So they eat the top third out. So tall grass grazing works for sheep and cattle as well as the sheep. Okay. So manage herbivores, reduce fertilizer, tillage, reseeding, bare soil, irrigation, herbicides, and pesticides. And all of these 6 here is what we were inputting a lot prior to 2014. So we're basically spinning our wheels. And since 2014, after transitioning off for 4 years, from 2017 on, we have spent 0 for fertilizer, 0 for tillage, 0 for reseeding, or 25% or more or less for irrigation, 0 for herbicides, and 0 for pesticides. So are we happy? We are happy. It's working. Okay. And I should say too, the whole thing, why it works is because of the sheep or the cows. The herbivores are driving the system. Okay. Positive outcomes. We now enjoy very species diversity in our pastures to a point. We have 5 grasses, 2 of which came in. I don't even know where they came in from. One I don't even know what it is. It's some kind of wheatgrass. And the other one is quackgrass that's come in, but it's very controllable. And the bad part is we haven't got legumes established yet. We're waiting for legumes to grow. But we're sure they will in time, because the whole system encourages diversity amongst plants. We have very nutrient dense forages, which, as we were talking about earlier, helps our meat marketing, because the lamb just tastes really good. And you could go talk to a chef, and you say, we have very nutrient dense pastures. They get it right away. And they know that nutrient dense pastures leads to nutrient dense lamb, which leads to taste. That's how humans perceive nutrient density, is taste. So, and until we have a nutrient density meter that are trying, there's those that are trying to develop them now. This is just kind of a old thing. I think it works, you know. But when you taste meat that's been raised in a regenerative system, you can taste the difference. Okay. Our carrying capacity in the pasture is improved, yeah, Mike?
Dave, why have you chosen not to just introduce some perennial legumes in your pastures?
Well, we've tried for many years, Mike.
It just doesn't work.
The problem is the grass, there is no bare spots. The grass grows so fast that it just kind of takes over the legumes.
Is it smooth brown?
Yeah, we have regard brome. It's not smooth brome, it's regard brome, which is a meadow brome. And then we have orchard grass and intermediate wheatgrass. That's the one that came in. And what was it called? Garrison grass. And then the fifth one is quackgrass. And we spend a lot of time and money trying to get rid of quackgrass for 20 years, and it doesn't work, for one thing. And now, under this system, it works great because it's very controlled. Our quackgrass isn't spreading anymore like it used to. In fact, quackgrass is a very highly nutritious forage. It just doesn't grow very much. That's why everybody hates it. You know, you just don't get the tonnage, but it's not a problem to us anymore. That problem has just gone away. Okay. So what we're basically doing is we're grazing tall grass. And these are the three things that Gabe Brown told me. He said you need long rest periods, high stocking density, trample half of it. So if you don't take anything else away from tonight, and you've just got to go and apply it to your ranch, those are the three things you need to do. So we have a 42-day pasture rest. That's up from 22 that we started with. We went to a 32 prior to 2013 to get rid of the parasite problem. That did work. And as a side note, we didn't know it, but the barber pole worm cycles, the life cycle is 22 days. So when we went to sheep from milk cows, we thought that what's good for milk cows has got to be really good for sheep. So we were on 22 days pasture rest, and that was exactly matched the life cycle of the barber pole worm. So every time we came into a new pasture, they were just waiting for us, the larvae. You know, so it really, that's why we got into the whole mess of having to deworm so many times during the summer. And it's like $1,500–1,600 plus all day of your time once a month to get rid of those worms. So it wasn't sustainable at all. So 42 days of pasture rest. This is unirrigated. I'm confident almost anywhere in Montana, 42 days of rest will work very well for you. High stocking density, we run about 750 animals per acre. And when we go into a paddock, this one right here was taken right around mid-July. It was grazed 42 days before. So you can see the production we're getting by the height of the net there. It's about this high after 42 days. No fertilizer. Daily moves, this picture shows our stocking density. A lot of sheep per acre there, and they're gone in 24 hours. And then this is what it looks like after they've been grazed. You can see an awful lot of it is trampled flat, and that's what you want, because the bacteria, the fungi, they can't get a hold of it if the grass is sticking out. It's got to be trampled. So we're basically essentially providing two pathways for soil biology to be fed. One is through the root exudates, and the second one is through decomposition of trampled grass. So we're kind of being diverse in that way, and that's all there is to it, you know. Okay. So let's just kind of look at them separately. 42 days of rest. This lets the plant run the show. It's giving them enough time to photosynthesize, grow leaves, grow roots, and feed soil biology. And up to like 70% of what the plant photosynthesizes in a 42-day cycle goes out the roots to feed soil biology. It's amazing. Plants have evolved, and they know they have to do that in order to get nutrients coming back to them in a plant available form. And you know, all this business that your fertilizer person is going to tell you that you don't have enough plant available or even enough raw minerals in your soil to grow a certain yield, it's all bunk. There's tons of mineral in your soil. You know, it's been adding to for eons of time. You just don't have the way to mineralize it into a plant available form. And so that's all that regenerative grazing is doing, is getting the bacteria and the fungi and the nematodes and protozoa all working together so they are mineralizing elements into plant available form. So for 42 days rest, this is what it looks like when we turn out. There's about 2,200 pounds of dry matter per acre in this picture right here. And I keep this on my phone as a reminder of what it looks like every spring. And I also take a hoop to check it. And that's when we go out. And it's about 10 days after what we usually turned out, when grass was this 8 inches to 10 inches. And it's about 1,000 pounds of dry matter then. Because when we first started the sheep after the cows, we never wanted to see any headed out grass there. It was verboten, you know. But we've totally changed our mindset on it. So this is the trick. You just take a week and a half longer to turn out. And what that does is all summer long, it allows the grass to get ahead of the sheep in the early spring, so that you're grazing a grazing wedge that is like this all summer. Here's your x-axis. The grazing wedge is like this. This is 42 days instead of like this, which is 22 days. So as long as you keep your pasture rest at 40 days, when you stop in the fall, like for us, it's mid-September, you're gonna have a grazing wedge that is twice as high as a 22-day rest period. And so that means we actually have 2.25 times the amount of dry matter to graze in the fall and the winter than we did before. Which, at $200 a day, is a lot of money. And that's something, when we just started, we were just trying to get rid of our fertilizer bill or reduce it. We never thought about that at all. It just showed up the first year that we did it. We go, wow, this is really cool. You know, totally not planned for, but it happened. So I guess that's it. Next one. So high stocking density is the second strategy that you need to use. This is what it looks like almost every day in our fields. There's about 750 actual sheep in 1 acre there. Our paddocks are actually 2/3 of an acre, so there's 500 sheep in 2/3 of an acre, which works out to about 750 animals per acre. And so it's dense. And like this girl here, she's got her mouth full there. It's doing two things. There's every sheep in that whole pasture's got a mouthful, right? And every time a cow or a sheep or a lamb eats a mouthful of grass, what happens? Exudates out the roots, because that grass plant knows it's got to grow soon, and it's not gonna grow unless it gets nutrients, and so it's putting out exudates in order to get the nutrients from the soil biology. The other thing that's really cool about high stocking density is all these sheep, in addition to eating out there, you know, in that kind of density and that kind of uniformity, they're also piddling and pooing, right? So they're cycling, and it's not all going into a corner in the field, it's throughout, distributed throughout the paddock. So that's what's cool about high stocking density. In order to get a density this high, we have to move every day. Okay. The third thing is trampled grass, and we talked about that already a little bit. What trampled grass does is two things. One, you're only eating half the grass. You're grazing half and you're trampling half. And so, you guys have probably seen that Hall of Fame picture that NRCS loves to put in on their pamphlets and everything. And it looks like this. This is a plant. Leaves. Here's the roots. And this plant has been allowed to be grazed back off. And figuratively, this is how many roots you have left once it's been grazed. And this plant here has the same number of leaves, but it is grazed maybe 75 to 80%. And guess how many roots are there? Oops, green. Maybe figuratively. Soil scientists, range scientists, everybody has measured that since 1950, and it's true. And so we're grazing half and we are leaving half. But because our stock density is high enough, that what we leave is all trampled, which is a good thing. So this is what that same paddock that we just showed the last slide, this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see. There's a lot of trampled grass here. And that's what we want to produce, put a roof over our soil and to provide that second pathway to decompose grass. So this goes back to that tall grass slide we had where they're going into the paddock. And so I thought, maybe there is gain in tall grass. And so this one here, this arrow right here, that is a Canadian thistle. You can see it is stripped of the leaves. And a lot of these other stems are stripped. And that, when I first saw that, this all goes back to watching, sit back and watch. When I saw that, I go, I'm just gonna take a forage sample of only leaves. I did, TDN was 59%, food protein is 17, and this is our average daily gain over about a 5-year average is 0.60. So you can see, 59% TDN isn't a dairy ration, but it's a doggone good sheep or cow ration, for production. Food protein, you can get growth with 17%. So I was totally wrong when I thought tall grass is not going to produce a feed value enough to grow lambs out. Okay.
Is that TDN the
Yeah.
whole plant, or is that?
No, that's just the leaves. Yeah, that's a good point. I should have said that. If you took the whole plant, it would probably be about 49% TDN and probably 11, maybe 10% crude protein.
Okay.
But they're not taking the whole plant, are they? They're taking just the leaves. And that's key. And they're leaving the stem and they're trampling it down. And other thing is when you have grass that's, over 40 days of rest, the stems get a little lignified. And so when sheep foot trampled steps on it, it doesn't bounce back like it does when it's really vegetated. And so if it doesn't bounce back, it does no good to the soil microbes. But when it's stepped on and it doesn't bounce back, they can get at it then. Okay, we talked a lot of this already. Oh, the other thing is non-selective grazing when you have high stock density. Those cows or sheep, doesn't matter what they are, they're gonna eat everything in that paddock. Because they know that if they don't eat it, sister over here is gonna eat it. So there's competition out there and that drives it. And so this is part of getting the soil microbes to work for you because you're providing a pathway that has trampled grass, decomposed grass. Okay. So in summary, regenerative grazing is really just about feeding soil microbes. And we're feeding them through 2 pathways that we've already talked about, plant exudates and trampled grass. This picture here was taken about July or June 20th to 30th in that range. you can see this is a 30-inch net. There's probably 8,000 pounds of dry matter in this paddock. And it's profuse, it's dense, and it's tall. And this picture here shows this field. This one here shows the field after a 24-hour graze. You can see it's pretty flattened. And this is the same field in first week of October. And where my fingers are holding up there, let's start at the bottom. This down here is the first graze, trampled ground. That's this right here. And there's nothing there, right? It's all black, which is really cool because that tells you that your system is working. They decomposed all this grass that was trampled into June. About 2.5 months later, it's gone. If it was still there, we'd think, uh-oh, something's not working, you know, but it's all gone. And then the grass that's in my hands, this was grazed about, 40 days later after this. So you can see it's all brown. It's really starting to get decomposed. And then the green grass here is what's coming up in September's growth. Okay,
So
yeah,
I
Leah?
had a question on that last picture with the fencing going down. Do you mow in between the fencing so that it doesn't touch the,
We did for 27 years.
now you don't, because your sheep are so trained?
Well, we want it trampled, for one thing, so there's nothing to mow.
But it doesn't short out the circuit,
From the fence?
the metal fencing, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
And we did have to make amends. We use a 36 joule charger now instead of a 12, which is the largest one they make stateside. New Zealanders, they just laugh at our electric fence system. You know, they're up to 50 and 100 joules on their pasture system. Because the biggest thing an electric fence has to do is what? Fear, right?
Yeah.
Those cattle and those sheep, they gotta be afraid of that fence. And so does a predator. And so if you're right, if you put it through here, the 12 joule charger, it's about 2,500 to 3,000 volts in it. You need 5,000 volts to keep sheep in and 5,000 volts to keep coyotes out. So and what happens if you don't have it, and I'm speaking from lots of experience of years, is the sheep don't respect it, particularly the lambs, and they go through it and they get tangled up in it, and half the time the lamb dies from strangled. And so we had enough of that, and we spent $1,400 on a 36 joule charger, and the problem has largely gone away. So all I did, we don't use a four-wheeler to make, you know, the trail to put the net in. I just walk backwards and hand out the net, you know, spew out the net. And when you have grass this tall and that's been growing 40 days, it's got lignin in the stem. And so when you step on it too, it's pretty well flat. You know, so with that, in addition of a 36 joule charger, it keeps 5,000 volts in there, which is a very good thing. Because if it's less than 5,000, you're in trouble. Somebody's gonna get out, or somebody that's not supposed to be in there gets in, like a stray dog or a coyote. Yeah, or in some places a bear. Okay.
Will that keep a cow at bay on that fence too, a 36 joule charger?
You bet.
Okay.
A lot of times with cows and cattle, you only need one wire.
Yeah.
That's all I would use is one wire on a system where you're moving daily. You know, once the cows get trained to it, and all you gotta do to train them is put them in a solid fence corral, even, you know, big as this room, put a wire around the perimeter and wait a day or two. They get to figure it out really fast. Calves too. And really on calves, it doesn't matter that much if they go under the one wire, because mamas can't get under it, doesn't want to go under it, so calves come back to mama. You know, so it's not a big deal. Pretty soon the calves just stay in. Okay, yeah, okay, we went over this already, but what grass species we have. And the big thing here is on the bottom here, input, no need to reseed anymore. when we were doing 22-day rest periods, we had a program every 6 to 7 years, we'd plow up and reseed because the grass would winter kill. You know, and you start having bare spots in your grass. Now, that's just something you had to do. I didn't think you could grow grass for longer than 6 or 7 years and still get 6 tons of dry matter. You know, but I was proven totally wrong. You know, we haven't, there's one field that we were concerned about crackgrass in 2013, I think it was. And we didn't really know what crackgrass would do in this type of a grazing system, so I hated crackgrass. And so we rounded it up and then plowed it the next spring and reseeded it, and really looking back on it now, we didn't have to do that. All of our other paddocks are at least 20 years old without being reseeded. You just don't have to, because you're giving the plant, the grass plant, time enough to grow deep roots and enough carbohydrates in the roots in the fall so it can make it through the winter. So, you know, reseeding is, you know, $100 an acre to plow it, disc it, actually seed it, and another $80 an acre to put the seed in the ground. So it's a lot of money, you know, and that just went out the window for us. It's really neat. Okay, please. So we talked about fencing already, but we use nets, but that's just for sheep. You know, I know people that with sheep guardian dogs that are using one wire in these kinds of systems with this kind of pressure on the fence, and they're doing fine. They've had to cull a few ewes that didn't read the book, but you know, after a few years, they can do it with one wire, but they don't have any predator losses because they got guard dogs in there. Cattle are really easy to run with one wire. So we use nets mainly, well, I'd have to say to keep the sheep in too, but we don't want stray dogs or coyotes eating our sheep. So we use nets that way. And then another thing is if you can at all possible use a square shaped paddock rather than a long skinny one, or even worse yet on pivots. You don't want to have a paddock that looks like this. And say, this is a pivot point right here, and say it's so much easier just to put the water right here. Because the next paddock, you can just go like this, and the water just has to be moved 3 feet. We did that for a long time, because it was easy, right? And then we started noticing that, golly, this area right here is a lot shorter than this area here, every single year. So we thought, well, it needs to be plowed up, right? This was about 15 years ago. It needs to be plowed up, because everybody knows you have to plow up your field and reseed, okay? Well, we did that, and 2 or 3 years later, it turned exactly the same way. And then I went out there with a infiltration ring. Everybody seen an infiltration ring? It's a round ring about 6 inches. NRCS sells them, but we just made one out of a pivot pipe that was 6 inches round. You pound it in 3 inches or so, and then you pour 2 inches of water in there, 1 inch, and then another inch, time it, and see how long it takes for that water to go down the ring into the ground. Well, what happened was, this was taking like about 2 to 3 minutes right here. And out here, well, from about right here on out, it's taking about 5 seconds. So ding, 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 you know, and why did this happen? And the reason why it happened, because this area here was perpetually overgrazed. Even though on 2/3 of an acre, that's not supposed to happen, right? But it did happen. So every time our sheep grazed these pivot paddocks, they went down here because they had to have water, and they just hung around for a while and then just kept eating right there. So it's really important. We found out if you're grazing a pivot, if this is your pivot point, here's your wheel tracks like this. Sorry, I'm getting into the schedule. But what we do is we just divide this inner core here into 4. And you can see they're a lot like a square paddock. And this doesn't happen anymore. And in fact, in 2 years, this grass here now is almost as tall as this. So it tells you the resiliency of nature once you give it a chance.
Where are you situating your water?
We're putting it in this thing right here. Our pivot only has an outside ring, well, it only has one ring really. This is about 200 feet. So our water line goes around like this now, and we can put our water anywhere right here, and so we just move a temporary water. If you have like a 200-acre pivot, it's the same principle. You just have a lot more wheel tracks, and you just go like this. Around and around, or if you have many more cows or many more sheep, you keep your core here, and then you go about, sorry, this is getting messy. Say this is about halfway out from the center. This line right here, this wheel track, then you just go out like this with your square things. Like that.
So the circular fence is a more permanent?
It might be in the future with us, because we don't have to fertilize anymore, we don't have to reseed anymore. So why not put a fence that helps this whole system? Great. Right now, we have a net that goes along this way, and then we just branch out like this, and then our center core is a net too. But I'm really tempted to put a permanent fence right along our water line there, because it just would take that much less time to change fences. Yeah, okay. When we started in 1982, our soil organic matter was 1.3%. We intensively grazed the dairy cows for 20 years, and then we kept that intensity going with the sheep. In 2014, it was 4.5%. So just grazing, a lot of inorganic fertilizer, it increased that much. But since about 2014 till now it's up to 6.5%. So it really makes it really, once your soil gets into going for you, your organic matter will improve, and just things get easier. Water is held longer in the soil. You have more robust bacterial and fungal populations. Everything starts working for you. So with that kind of organic matter, we have increased our irrigation cycle times to 10 days from 7 before we have to irrigate. And we use a Paul Brown probe to determine when we irrigate. We also have an electronic soil moisture meter that we basically calibrate the Paul Brown probe to, and we can go anywhere on the farm, anybody else's farm really, and say, yeah, you gotta irrigate, you gotta turn on the pivot right now, because it's 30 decimeters, and that's when you turn it on, and you turn it off at 10, and it's just like pushing the Paul Brown probe through butter. So, we went from 7-day irrigation cycles to 10, and that is, at least 25% less irrigation. We irrigate, we keep the water off of a paddock 3 days or more before it's been grazed, so we don't have compaction issues. And that's a question that a lot of people question about if you're intensive grazing, is compaction, right? You're supposed to get compaction soil. But we found that if you have at least 3,000 pounds of dry matter, you never get compaction. And we've irrigated, put down 1.25 inches down, and then it rained like 2 inches. Seldom happens in Whitehall overnight. And then it was time for the sheep to go in there, and we had no recourse other than to put them in there. They turned that grass black. And I thought, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen now? Well, 40 days later, it was some of the best paddock we had there. Which is not, it doesn't happen just to us. I've heard that expressed before too. You get all those roots churned up and everything, and the plants go, oh no, we gotta start growing fast, and they do. You just gotta have them more rest. And you might have to go 80 days instead of 40 days, depending on how bad they tear it up. But you can skip 1 day. There's enough resilience in the system. Skip over that paddock, for a day, and then come back 80 days later and get it. And then we try to irrigate, 1 to 2 days after we go out of that paddock with the sheep. So we're pretty intensive on our grazing, on our irrigation. That being said, in 2017 was, we had one of those years, those drought years, and we had to keep water in the river, and so our ditch mandatorily, voluntarily said, you gotta cut out your water, guys. And so we went the entire month of August, 12 days of irrigating. Normally, on our old system, we would have irrigated every day because it was warm. And we went 12 days and we saw no decrease in grass production. So that is huge when you're trying to sleep at night, you know, and it gives you a confidence that you have enough resiliency in your system, it'll work out, you know, if you come up against challenges like that. Okay, so we use hand lines and pivots. We've already gone
Hey,
through
Dave,
that.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So are you saying that you just run your pivot over like an acre and are you running the entire pivot every couple of days?
It takes us 12 hours to put down 2/3 of an inch of water
Around the whole pivot?
around the whole pivot. That's because it's a pretty small pivot.
Yep, so you're doing that, you're doing that every couple of days?
Yeah, we do it once and then again, and then we wait 10 days before we do it again.
Okay,
So it's about 1.25 inches every 10 days. And if it rains, then we adjust it accordingly. So the point is, I guess, it'll work with pivots or hand lines or wheel lines. You just have to tweak it, you know. Hand lines are a little bit easier than wheel lines in this type of a system because you've got to have, even with a 10-day irrigation cycle, you've got to have a wheel line ahead of the sheep and behind the sheep because they don't go over fences very good or through sheep or cattle. Yeah. So here we get to fear again. That's one thing that we've already talked about, and it's exceedingly important. It's this little guy here. He looks scared even, doesn't he? Yeah, he's got to be scared of this net right here, or he's likely going to be tangled up or dead. So we just found that a 36 joule charger is worth the money because we probably lost way more amount of lambs than about the 15 years that we tried to make a 12 joule charger work. You know, they would have paid for that 36 joule charger. You just don't want to touch it. It saps you. Okay. So here's our stock water. We're really simple. We just, a long time ago, we put a 3/4 inch black poly pipe above ground. And our field, let's just say our fields are square. It kind of is square. Well, I hope I didn't ruin this thing.
It's okay.
Okay. If you have a square field here, our field looks basically like this. And then there's some more by a driveway here, but that doesn't count. So we have a hydrant here. It's just a hydrant, regular hydrant, frost-free. And we go up this way. And then we have a cross fence here. A cross fence here. And that helps us only have to use 3 nets for any given move because we have a permanent fence this way. If we didn't have these cross fences here, we'd probably use twice as many nets on sometimes. And one of the neat things that we've learned about fencing is if you have to really work at it, you're not gonna do it. So you kind of got to set up your system, fencing system, so it's pretty easy for you to do. And that's what these cross fences do. So here's our stop water line. I kind of did this wrong. This is a pivot right here, and this is a pivot right here. So here's the line that's coming like this, and it comes all the way down there. There's about 2,000 feet of 3/4 inch black poly above the ground. And whenever we need a stock water. Our stock waters are a 55-gallon barrel cut in half, plastic one, weighs about 15 pounds or so. We just pick up the barrel and plumb it into a hose bib right here. Or right here, or right here. Wherever we need one, we just get out the hacksaw and put one in. It works tremendously better than if it was 6 feet under the ground. And in the beginning, you're trying to figure out, well, where do I need my stock waters? I'm not smart enough to figure that out. So we just went the easy way, and sure, every spring it freezes during the winter, and we probably have to repair 3, 4, maybe 5 places where it broke the 3/4 inch black poly. Takes about 5 minutes and maybe $5 or $6 worth of materials to mend it. And it's usually the same places, right? So after a couple, 3 times of fixing it, say right here, every April, we just put a bigger pipe, another whole section right there. Otherwise, you got more money in fittings than you do pipe. So that's our stock water system. Here's a picture of our 55-gallon barrel cut in half. It's just an old dairy, sanitizer solution barrel. And it's got it's plumbed into a garden hose, which is then plumbed into the hose bib off the main line. And this picture was taken this winter at 30 below. And how come it ain't froze, by golly? It's because it's running. It's running about a half a gallon a minute. And we're on a well system, and so we just figure it's gonna go back to the well. We do have a little energy cost there, but look at the free water you get. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little hole here and the water's coming out there. That's about half a gallon a minute. It works really well. This is our other type of water. This is a cane water. They're really nice waters. The floats work in them, contrary to a lot of waters that don't work with their floats. This little water here, you can see the size of it with this steer here. It just fits his mouth, but it'll water 200 ewes easy on a pasture. And you gotta remember though, that pasture runs between 20% and 30% dry matter. So there's a lot of water in that grass. And the other thing that's cool about sheep is they basically are a desert animal. So they don't require as much water as a cow does. And they don't all come at once, which is another nice thing about sheep, a trait. They just come in 2s and 3s or 1s and 2s, and they take their drink and then they go out and the next 1s or 2s come in. It's not like cows that just crowd over the whole thing, So it works. That's one nice thing about sheep too. One of the main reasons why I like sheep. Yeah, Mike.
So do you need to leave that water dribbling into those 55-gallon drums that you cut in half? Do you leave the water running slowly into that, or do you fill it up and turn it off?
No, it runs continuously, 24 hours a day.
Okay.
And even in the
So do you
summertime.
create a big,
No.
I guess it's only there for a day, so it doesn't
Right.
really create.
It's only there for a day. It has a spot that's about this big right here, a square right there that kind of gets trampled up. But it's a small thing, the sacrifice. We don't worry about it.
Okay.
In fact, it's easier next time you come around and the grass is this tall, where your hose pit is, because the water was, the grass doesn't grow quite as much in just an area about this big, so. Yeah, so winter and summer, these type of waters that we use there are running continuously, 24 hours a day. And we use these more in the summer because they have the float, but you can't use this, when it gets too much below freezing, because there's no flow going all the time, so it just freezes up solid, and then it also freezes up your stock water line the whole way, so it doesn't work too good. But we've had these, 20, 30 below this system here. As long as you keep water moving, it doesn't freeze. Okay. Okay, I was talking to B, yeah, about what we use to kind of reassure us that this system is going to give us enough nitrogen throughout the grazing season. And this is a Haney test. We just this is what we use the NRCS hoop, we cut that and then we weigh it and then we get the information on how much dry matter we have, which we do in every field. And there's 5 paddocks per field, so then that's what we put in our spreadsheet. But the Haney test would just take a sample of the soil, about 20 samples, send it in. We use Regen Ag Lab, Ward Lab works good, Midwest works good. Those are the 3 that we've used. One caution is there's a lot of labs out there that say they do a regenerative or a Haney test, and they don't have the equipment to do it because it takes very expensive equipment. Spectrographs and all those big names that I can't even pronounce, but they cost like millions of dollars. And so a lot of labs that have traditional soil chemistry equipment, they try to do it, the Haney test, with that equipment, it doesn't work. Their results are erratic and wrong. So pick a lab. I'm talking to somebody else that has had good results with it, and just stay with them, because even if you have 3 good labs that are accurate, if you send them here and there to everyone, you're going to get different answers all the time, just like a regular soil test. So pick a lab, stay with them, and then correlate what you see on the paper there, the results, to what is actually happening in your field, and then you're good to go. We use this Haney test. You have to wait for the soil temperature to get to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or else it's not measuring your soil bacteria, which is something that a lot of people don't realize, and also the labs don't tell you about a lot of times. So if you go out there in the spring and May and you have 50-degree soil temperatures, you might as well not even take the test. It's not going to tell you a thing. Same thing in the fall. If you go out there in September and you've had a lot of freezing weather, soil temperatures less than 60 degrees, it's just, terrible. So make sure your temperature is 65 degrees or more. In our area, it's about third week in June that it finally warms up to do that. So what the Haney test does for N, P, and K is it measures soil biology basically, and then from that soil biology, it projects how much N, P, and K you're going to have for the next 90 days, which is really important because especially if you're transitioning, you're wondering, okay, I've had good grass production now, my grass looks really good, it's nice bright green, it's not lime green, which indicates no nitrogen, but what about the rest of the season? Or am I going to have enough N? And that was really critical for us, and especially the 4 years that we transitioned, because we cut back fertilizer every year. So this Haney test worked great. It was never wrong. So if you go on the scientific literature and read about that on the internet, you will not get that impression necessarily. There's a lot of, especially people that had devoted their whole life to soil testing with one, regular standard test. They are not very happy with a soil test like this that tells the producer what he actually needs to know in one time. And so human nature says this doesn't work. I'm sure it's not working, and I can prove it here in these 16-foot by 16-foot plots, but it's worked great for us, and it's working for a lot more people than us too. So I'm really happy with the Haney test, and we've used it a lot. We use it every year. Okay. Okay, we talked about this also, but one of the great things about regenerative grazing and long rest periods is you have a lot more grass in the fall and the winter to graze with. This picture was taken, I think, the first week of December of this year. You can still see there's green grass in here. And if you allow your cattle to just run over your whole field, starting say October or November, what are they going to do? They're going to run around eating all the green grass, right? So what you do to prevent that is give them 4 to 7 day paddock periods. So you always have green grass in front of them, which means you don't have to spend money on protein tubs, which can be quite costly. So we went to 7 day moves in the winter because it seems to work for us. We always have green grass in front of them that way, and we don't feed tubs anymore at all. The other point I wanted to make, when you go out of a paddock, leave 8 to 10 inches. Even if it interferes with your basketball schedule that night, change them. It doesn't take long to change. But what you're doing when you're leaving 8 to 10 inches, you're leaving that winter roof over the soil. So it protects your microbes. They don't like to shiver. They go dormant if they shiver. You protect your roots. And you think about next spring. Because all those primordial growth buds in the grass itself that form late September, if you eat down to 2 inches, you just ate all the primordial growth buds, which is mean next spring, your grass is gonna be about 2 to 3 weeks late. So what you do in the winter has big influences on when you go out the next spring. Okay. So this is probably the most interesting slide from my standpoint. This is from 2017 to 2022. This is 2017, we went off of fertilizer and we've been off it ever since. So before 2017, I'm just calling this our conventional. We used 160 pounds of actual N per acre per year. Our 42-day rest regenerative system is 0. So we got $160 an acre conservatively, today's prices savings right there. That's if you use urea. If you use ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, it's more than that. Our irrigation energy, beforehand, this is from Power Records, it was $141 an acre. Now it's down to $110. So we're saving $30 an acre right there. Our winter grazing, we used to graze 45 days, now we're up to 75 days. And if you put a price on that at $200 hay, it actually comes out to about $95 an acre, but I wanted to be conservative, so I just put it at $85. The total is $76 an acre. On this irrigation, if you include my time to move pipes 1 quarter more during the season, it's easily over $300 an acre that we are saving. And the neat thing about it is that it shows up in your bank account. It's not just hypothetical numbers. We've taken these savings and we've plowed it back into our pastures by over a 5-year period, buying used pipe, and now we have about 80% of our pasture that is handlined is now all solid sets. Which when you're 70-year-old, it's really cool to just turn on the valve instead of move the pipe, right? So that's what we've done with our part of our savings every year is we've just improved our infrastructure in terms of irrigation pipe. And we got about 2 or 3 more lines to make solid sets and then we'll be done. But that's what this money that we're saving is what we're using. So this is the transition. This is part of setting back and watching. The third thing you need to do. This is in 2016. And this part of our pasture has always been the least productive. It was about an acre. And so in 2016, I called up the fertilizer dealer and said, do you have a cart that's available? And it was right before July 4th weekend. And of course, our ditch was going down to kill the algae that next week. So I needed to get the fertilizer on there and I needed to get it irrigated in. And he says, yeah, I think so. I said, well, what do you mean you think so? You know, what's that mean? He says, well, I'm pretty sure it works. Well, so I said, okay, load it up with the fertilizer. I'll come get it. And I spread it. And about halfway through the field, I started realizing that instead of spreading 50 feet, for some reason, it only spread 25. Why? So what do? You know, I was kind of going, ugh. So I just figured I'm just going to keep spreading the way I did and we'll see what happens because I couldn't go back and try to figure out which I hit and which I didn't. So this is what it looked like a month later in August. You can see in this worst part of the field, it's stripped. It's lacking in right here. Pale green grass, not very much growth. it got 72 units and instead of 36, what was the target amount, nice green growth. And then it doesn't show over here, but there's another strip here that's pale green. But the neat thing was, the whole rest of the pasture, no stripes. 0. So, instead of that guy doing us a bad turn, he did us a really good turn. Because then we figured out, hey, we don't need fertilizer anymore, except for this little place here, you know? So that just said, okay, 2017, we're off the fertilizer limit. So that's, you have to, besides getting the plants to work, you know, the soil microbes to work for you and the plants to run the show, you have to be out there looking at what's happening and digesting it and making adaptive measures. Okay, so this is again about the last week of June. You can see you can't even see the sheep in there. The grass is so tall. Okay, now please. So wet roller on. We got about 10 minutes left, is that right? Sydney? Yeah,
Or
so we have to quit? Yeah, okay.
if
So-
anyone wants to take off at 7:30, they're welcome to, but I'm happy to stick around if you are.
Okay, yeah, I'm very happy.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to ask me, what went wrong? This is your time to chime in. Because things always go wrong when you poke a biological system here. Over here, something pops up. Yeah,
How did
Martin,
your labor increase?
pardon?
How did your labor increase or decrease when you went to daily moves?
We were daily moving for 40 years, so that did not change a bit. And so our labor did not increase for fencing at all. If we were to go from a system where you moved every 2 weeks, say, to every day, yes, your labor will definitely increase. It takes us conservatively about 45 minutes to change a fence. So all we do is if this is where the sheep are grazing right here, let's see if we can do this. Say this paddock right here. And this is where they were yesterday. We just take up yesterday's back fence, which is for us 3 nets, and we move it over to a front fence right there. And that takes about 30 minutes to do that. And then we open the gate where the nets come together, each net. And we say, here's sheep. In about 20 seconds, all 500 sheep are from one paddock to another. It's like pouring water down a funnel. Yeah. So it takes very little time to actually move them. It takes about half an hour, 35 minutes to move the fence and hook it up to electricity. So that comes to a neat point is when someone is thinking about this, their first reaction is, I don't have that much time to move fences, right?
Bless you.
You know, so yes, I agree with you, you don't. So one thing you could do, if say you have a couple thousand acres of irrigated, you know, you probably don't have enough time to fool with fences. You've got it right now anyway. Okay, so what you can do is that if this is your whole ranch, your whole grazing irrigated ranch, and just say there's 10 pivots or whatever else is on there. And this just figuratively, you're going around changing fences, or, you know, say you have it like this into 4 quadrants. In one of these quadrants, just make 1 day graze right there. And every time you get into this quadrant, you graze high stock density, trample half, eat half. And then you wait 40 days wherever you are and go in there again. So you can transition really easy. It works really good if you're on 3-week pasture rest, right? Because if you're on 3-week pasture rest, you're gonna hit this thing at 22 days, you skip that little area and you go around again, and then you graze it at 44 days. At 4 weeks, or 6 weeks. Yeah. So that's one way to get started in this thing. And keep records. See how much you don't have to fertilize this. if you can, you know, it's gonna be hard with a pivot to isolate that little bit. But you can kind of get an idea, and you can also get how much more grass is growing in this little area here that you graze that way. And pretty soon, after a couple of years, you're gonna go, no, I could run twice the amount of stock by doing it this way rather than this way. And if I can run twice the amount of stock and have twice the amount of winter grazing, perhaps I don't have to put up so much hay that I normally do. And this isn't hypothetical, this actually happens to people. And then they get better and they start doing more and more regenerative grazing, and pretty soon they figure out, you know, this would work a whole lot better if I calved in May or June than February. Because I can run all, oh, our grazing ledge quit here, but this whole big amount of grass that we have for winter, I can run my cattle and my sheep all the way through the winter now, as long as I meet their nutritional demands, which go way up for cattle the last 2 months. So they're not gonna do very well if you push them, make them do their last 60 days of gestation on cows with dry old grass. Not gonna work, right? But if you make them calve in June, they're gonna have at least a month of nice green grass, which will support a fetus the last gestation. And you might have to supplement it 2 to 4 weeks of good hay, but that's 2 to 4 weeks of good hay versus, like, some people are feeding hay in December. We just think of the savings that you can get that way.
Did the snow this winter affect your stockpiling or efficiency?
It could have, but it didn't. One thing that we do try to do is what we try to leave at least a week that's set aside for deep snow. And so, because when the sheep are grazed in a small enough paddock like that you move every 7 days, they trample it, right? They trample the snow down, and if it doesn't warm up with a Chinook or something like that, then it ices over and they can't get to it. So when that happens, we just turn them out in a paddock that we've reserved, that has at least a week's worth of grazing in it, most commonly 10 days anyway. And that's snow that hasn't been, first of all, it's dry snow anyway, like we get around here. And so they can dig down 2 feet of snow and find what they need to eat. So then as soon as the Chinook comes, we go back to their paddock where they were. And we just save that paddock that's in reserve, we graze it last. So it's kind of a technique you can use to do it. We didn't bring a picture along, but we have pictures of them grazing through 2 feet of snow. And they get along just fine. And they don't need water then either. Because sheep exist on snow really easily. Cows do too, but not quite as easy. We found that out years ago when we hauled water out to them in the middle of the winter in 55-gallon barrels with a siphon hose, you know, and filled up their water, and they just sat there and looked at us. And after that, we said, okay, we've learned. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I just want to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench. 2 questions. So on our place, we only flood irrigate.
Uh-huh.
And we have for years. It's all we have. We have nothing else. And we also fall calf in September and October. But I think that this system could work well, but my concern is the flood irrigation.
Yeah. Do you use border dikes or the wild
Border
flood?
dikes, yeah.
Well, yeah, with your border dikes, if you can control your flood, it's gonna limit you a little bit to a degree. You have to work around, you know, say your border dike will support 3 or 4 days of grazing. You're gonna have to work around that.
Sure.
But it, you know, which will cause a little bit of limitations, but it would work. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do, yeah. If you have wild flood, not gonna work. Because you're gonna be irrigating or you're grazing, and that's not too good.
Just about,
Yeah, and what was your other concern?
just with like the fall capping with where we
Yeah.
had it in September and October, but.
Well, I think when you're fall calving, you're hitting the physiological life cycle of those cows they need a lot of grits, a lot of nutrition. And what you're doing by grazing, stockpile grass is likely not gonna supply it, probably past the end of November. It's gonna start looking like that slide that we had of about 70% dry old brown grass and maybe 20% green grass. So it probably won't work. Yeah. It might work for 2 months. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of designed for springtime births, yeah. Great points,
Just,
great points.
I'd love to try it. It's not gonna work. I'm like, don't say it's not gonna work. Just consider the options.
Yeah, you know, there's lots of things that go into ranches, you know, the bottom line is economics, but there's a lot of other factors too, in context of your place. You know, it works out, you know, how it works out that you have to cap in the fall, jobs, whatever it is, you know. You have to work around those things. Yeah. And you're kind of going against nature, you know, by fall cabbing, which, that's just something you have to deal with, you know, and figure out what works best. But border dikes would work. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Q, Mike?
Dave, I got, some property down on the river bottom, there's no electricity around there for getting water, and there's a creek over, I've got some, it's fenced in it, say 3 pastures right now. Is there, do you think I'm trying to figure out how to divide it up without the ability to get water there. Have you ever heard of anybody like having like an alleyway or something that was set up where those cattle could travel down to get to the water, and then, you know, it was narrow enough where they wouldn't be wasting a bunch of time there, and then go back into a more of a paddock where they could graze? Is that,
Yeah, I think.
is there any other thing that might work that you know of?
Well, you know, you're gonna run into problems with repairing, you know, tearing up the ground, you know,
Yeah.
in the riparian zone. But if you have water gates, you know, that just tears up the ground in a very small area. And it doesn't let them get into the stream if you fence it in the, you know, the whole, the stream, so they can't bodily get in there, they just get in there and take sips, you know? There's other things too, there's a thing called let me know about, what are they called, water rams? Anybody seen anything about them? Do you know, Mark?
It's like a physical pump that,
Runs off stream flow,
yeah,
so you might be able to, make one of those work for you to pump out of the, you know, if it's not too much of an elevation head difference. I think NRCS can get that information to you. If they can, NCAT can, they've got some publications on them.
Who can?
NCAT, NCAT, it's National Center for Appropriate Technology. They're out of Butte here. I used to be a grazing specialist for them, that's why I know them. But they got, it's all free information. You can go on to NCAT. Their website is called ATTRA, ATRA. You just Google ATRA, and there are hundreds of publications. And I know that publication is in there. They're a very good resource to use because they have, a lot of them are farmers, they're specialists, and they talk your language. Okay, I'm hunting for a really big question, a challenge that happened to us, yeah,
Okay, so you raised polypay?
yes.
Why did you choose polypay?
Oh, when we started with the sheep, we had Columbias before that, just 30 with the milk cows. And the only problem with Columbia is they're really nice sheep, but their feet grow really long on irrigated pasture. So we knew we couldn't, with 200 ewes, we couldn't be trimming feet twice a year, you know? So Columbias were out, and unfortunately, we had tried Suffolks before and we could not keep them in. So they were ruled off the list, and we were attracted to polys because they have multiple births, like a lot of triplets. And at the time, we figured we could raise bums time-wise and everything. After 20 years of raising bums, we're not too sure about it. That's a great thing, You know, it costs to raise bums, you know, and some years you make them, you make money on them, and some years you lose them. But that was our main thing. We wanted to maximize the amount of meat that we could grow per acre. And Polly's were giving us triplets, you know, about a quarter to a third of the ewes had triplets. And so that was our thinking process. But as we get older, we're not too sure if we want to raise 60 or 70 bums a year either, so. Yeah.
Do you have, nursemaid to feed the bums or,
Like
you know,
a
one of
new-
those machines?
Oh, yeah, the milk machine,
Milk
yeah,
machine thing?
we do have one now.
Okay,
Yeah, they work great,
I bet.
yeah, as long as they function. And the minute they go out, you got a whole bunch of bums that are starving to death. And then when you get it working again, you really gotta watch out that they don't bloat the milk, just overeating the milk when that first thing happens. So, there's really that we found anyway, there's no better way to raise a bum than with goat milk. Because it's very high in fat, high in protein, and it will not bloat them, because some of the milk replacers do bloat. And even with the machine, and they can get it, access it anytime they want to, day or night. But we have found a replacer that really minimizes that now. It takes quite a long time to figure which one that was.
What is that one?
It's Purina Lakes.
Okay.
They've got a human grade milk replacer. And I guess that is critical because they source milk from human grade powder rather than feed grade. And for some reason it really cuts down on the milk load, which is very, very disappointing when you go out there and the lamb has been on feed for about 27, 30 days and it's ready to wean, 30 pounds and it's dead. Not only is bloating a very horrible way to die, it's very horrible on your bottom. So you got about $50 worth of milk in that critter and you'll never realize it. So it's a bad way to go, dying from milk bloat. Well, I'll just tell you one thing that happened to us. Huge challenge was we changed from a 22-day rest period to a 32-day rest period in 2009, specifically to counteract the barber pole worm, because we were getting killed by that little bugger. And so by 2013, we had enjoyed a lot of success. We no longer had to deworm. During the summer, maybe 20 lambs after they were weaned, which we died and went to heaven, you know? So we went to the system in 2016, and all of a sudden, the barber pole worm came back. Not as bad as it was in a 22-day cycle, but it came back and we were having to deworm, like maybe 50 lambs post-weaning out of 400. And so we go, oh man, it almost makes you cry, you know, because you thought you had this licked, and then you go to this new system that's supposed to be great, you know, and the barber pole worm comes back. And so what we figured happened was all this trampled grass that we're laying down, which is about 2 inches thick when we get out of a paddock, and then we irrigate on top of it. I think that barber pole worm larvae is a really nice place for him not to die. You know, when it's drier, they die, they just desiccate. Because the barber pole worm has only so many wiggles of the larvae. They hatch out of the eggs after about 4 days after they're pooped out, and then they go into larvae form after about 4 days. And then they have a certain number of wiggles, and all they do is wiggle. They don't have legs, they have to have water to transport themselves up from where they ended up pooped out to the stem of the plant. So dew will do it. Rain definitely does it. Irrigation definitely does it. But sooner or later, after about 22 or 3 days, especially when it's hot, the hotter it is, the more they wiggle. So after about 25, 27 days of wiggling, they're dead. But if you give them a nice shady area with a lot of water in it, that's what we figured happened. But the neat thing about it, and it's true with all regenerative grazing practices, it seems to be, is after a while, it goes away. It could be that the soil population is now robust enough that your fungal component includes fungal trapping funguses. They have long fungal cilia, was it
Mycelium.
Yeah, mycelium, and a certain species traps parasite larvae. So it might be that, but it's disappeared, largely. We treated about 30, I think, lambs last year, as opposed to 60 or 70. So, and this happened about 2018, and we go, oh man, we just solved the barber problem, and now it comes back again. So we were really tempted to go back to the old system, And the biggest thing I want to leave you with is have integrity. Don't backslide, because nature somehow a lot of times solves problems for you. And the thing about this whole regenerative grazing system is nature has R&D'd this for eons of time. So you got her on your side, and if you can just take a helicopter up there and look at the whole system, look how much money you're saving on irrigation, look how much money you're saving on fertilizer, look how much money you're saving on not having to plow up and reseed anymore. Look how much money you're saving on not having to worry about fly strike anymore. That's when the lamb or the ewe gets so washy in a very low short grass system that their manure gets really washy and it gets all over their butt, and that's just an invitation for flies to come lay their eggs in, which turn into maggots, and it is terrible. When you get hot days and hot nights and a pooey butt, you're gonna have maggots, and they can, in about 3 days' time, they can go from a big silver dollar to about an area, like this big on the back of that lamb. And it'll kill them if you don't do something about them. But what it means is we would have to get in every ewe and every lamb, go through every one, cut around the backside of them, see if there's a maggot there, spray it with spray that sometimes doesn't work anymore, and that takes all day long, Now with this system, there's not that washy grass in there anymore, and they don't get pooey butted anymore. So it's another benefit, So you take a look at all those things, and then you take a look at your problem, and you go, somehow I can solve this problem with a biological answer instead of a chemical one. Chemical one meaning going back to inorganic fertilizer and 32 days of rest, which we proved it to us anyway, that it will eliminate the barber pole worm. So what we did is we fence line weed, biological answer. Fence line weaning is great in cattle or sheep, both, because it reduces stress on that lamb or calf. And it just turns out that the barber pole worm is extremely effective against stressed out animals. So you take that stress away, you don't have anywhere near as much barber pole infection. And you don't have 7 days of hollering back and forth, lamb to you. We used to put the ewes on one side of the pasture and the lambs on the other side of the pasture. And it was a ruckus for about a week, When you fence line wean them, they can still get to mama, she's there, she's close to them, but she's on the other side of the fence. And so the lambs aren't near as walling or anything. Like I got pictures of them 12 hours after we weaned them with the fence line, and there's maybe 10% of the 400 lambs that are balling. There's probably 60% of the ewes that are balling. But the lambs is what we're concerned about, for being stressed out. And after not even 3 days, we just take the dog and gently move the lambs away from the ewes, hardly a ball. So it's really cool. And with cattle, it's the same way. You just eliminated a prime stress out of that whole weaning process, because mamas are important. you're a little lammy or a little calf, mama is number one on your list as favorite people. You take that mama away, of course, you're gonna be very sad and wondering what in the world happened. You know, so that's how we solved our barber pole room, which cropped up again with a biological answer, and we didn't backslide. And that's one thing that Greg told me, when I first talked to him, he says, there will be problems, but just solve the problems with a biological answer instead of a chemical one. And I think it's a good answer. I have one more slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, you guys keep pass. Okay, so whenever I get a problem, I took this picture in August, I think it was, a couple, 3 years ago. This shows grass production, taking kind of the ground level. I measured, there's 5,000 pounds of dry matter per acre. In this, that's after 42 days of rest. No fertilizer, zero, nothing going out of my pocket. And I think if I'm a sheep, would I like to eat grass like this? Or next slide, please. That. It's half as tall. When it's out in the field, you can really notice that the color isn't there. It's not, it doesn't look really appetizing. Whereas that previous one is breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. So I keep these two pictures on my phone. And when there's anything that goes wrong, I ask myself, what would you rather have, that or this? With all the inputs that goes with it. Okay, next please. So this is hiding, yeah. So our farm's never gonna be the same because of this. And I think we are not the exception by any means. Anybody can do this. Anybody can transition to this. It just takes some tweaking. Each individual ranch is gonna have to tweak their own little way of doing it. And if you have any questions, here's my phone number. Our email address is Montana Highland Lamb @yahoo.com. I welcome any questions because I want you guys to enjoy the success that we've enjoyed. I really thank you guys for staying over. I've really enjoyed your attention and your questions, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you, Cindy.
And thank you everyone for coming. Feel free to take some food on your way out, and then Samantha, if you wanted quickly introduce yourself.
Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to say. The other common question is, if you're moving every day, when do you take a vacation? How can you possibly take a vacation? That's important, right? It is important. What you can do is on the first cycle, when you got grass, we have grass July 4th, that's the end of our first cycle. It's 10,000 pounds of dry matter per acre. It's this tall. So we just give them 6 days of grazing, and we set the net, so it's about 2 to 3 acres instead of 2/3 of an acre. And we say 5 feet. So you can take a vacation. You don't have to be tied to the system all summer long and be coming around.
I'll just be brief. My name is Samantha Farrett. I work for Montana Farmers Union. I'm a membership ambassador in this greater area. I actually work from home. I'm a rancher, then a wife, and then an ambassador for Montana Farmers Union. So like I mentioned earlier, my husband and I own and operate a cow-calf ranch out in the Toston area, fall calving, limousine cows. We're all different all around, red cattle, all those good things. I grew up on a hog farm. I'm a volunteer 4-H leader, FFA, all those things. And then all of a sudden I found Montana Farmers Union as a member, and there was a job offering that I get to go and educate people about agriculture and advocate for family farmers and ranchers. And I love it. It doesn't feel like work. So I am so happy to be here today in support of these efforts and our Rancher Roundtable, the series. I'll be here for everyone a little bit before. I'll bring some food, I'll bring some handout stickers and my knowledge and expertise, I guess, and share my journey with Montana Farmers Union with you. Always here to answer questions if you want to know more. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Too bad.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just plugging the regular thing, have been out on Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.